guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Every time I film lately, I feel like my camera is doing something weird and I'm on a weird angle, but I can't seem to, again, find an angle that I like, so we're just gonna go with this one for today's video. Anyways, today's video is about a topic that I actually had no idea about before I was suggested to cover it, and then I dove into it myself, and I do think that this topic is very interesting, so I hope that you guys enjoy this video, and with that all being said, let's get right into it. Today we are going to be discussing the topic known as the Philadelphia experiment. Now this topic is a little bit controversial as many people believe that there is nothing to this case and that it is just an urban legend, whereas many other people believe that this 100% happened and that the government's just lying, trying to cover up what they did. Now with that being said, I just want to remind everybody to take this entire video with a grain of salt because obviously there is no proof to either of these things. There's no proof that it actually happened, but there also isn't any proof that it actually didn't. So just take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt and remember to respect everybody else's opinions in the comments because I do feel like on some of these videos people kind of get a little bit aggressive about what they believe. But anyways, let's get on into it. This experiment was allegedly carried out by the US Navy at the Philadelphia Naval Yard in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And this entire case, or this experiment, was said to have taken place on October 28th, 1943. And basically with this experiment, they were working on trying and making their ships invisible. They wanted their ships to be invisible so that people couldn't see them approaching, you know, their enemies and whatnot, so that when they were on the water, they were able to not be seen. At this time, the USS Eldridge, a cannon-class destroyer escort, was conducting top-secret experiments that they were designing to try and gain command over the entire ocean. Now, the reason that they were doing all of these experiments, obviously, is because they wanted an upper hand over their enemies so that they knew what they were not going to lose. So again, like I already mentioned, a lot of people who really looked into this case or just heard about it do strongly believe that there is nothing to this and that it is just an urban legend. However, several people came forward over the last few years claiming that they had actually witnessed this experiment taking place firsthand. So like I already mentioned, they were trying to gain command over the entire sea, and somehow they thought that making their ships invisible would allow them to do that, and so somehow they gained the knowledge and the technology to make their ship invisible. These witnesses said that they had thought that they had mastered the technology to make this ship invisible. Now, there is absolutely no information on what technology they had used to make the ship invisible, but obviously, even if they had done this, I don't think that it would be known knowledge that they would just be spreading everywhere on how they did this, because then obviously it wouldn't be a weapon. But anyways, the witnesses said that they were sitting kind of looking at the ship, and it was on the water in this Philadelphia naval shipyard, and they were looking at the boat when all of a sudden it turned a really unsettling greenish blue color, almost looking as if it was radioactive. These people who had claimed to have witnessed this experiment taking place were also members of the Navy who saw this happening. They said that they were kind of distracted by the ship because again it had turned this weird color when all of a sudden they're looking at the ship and just like that, like something out of a movie, the ship just completely vanished right in front of their eyes. Now, again, in this experiment, they wanted to make the ship invisible, but that wasn't necessarily what they had done. The ship was not invisible, it just wasn't there anymore. After they did this experiment to that boat, the boat had just completely vanished. What's even crazier about this than the fact that the ship just disappeared is several hours after the ship vanished right in front of these people's eyes, there was reports that this exact ship had randomly appeared on the water in Virginia. And then several minutes after it had appeared on the water in Virginia, it then vanished from that area and returned back to the shipyard in Philadelphia. Now, what makes this case so gut-wrenching and creepy and unsettling is while they were doing this experiment, they did not want to do it on an empty ship. So all of the crew members who would normally be aboard the Eldridge were on the Eldridge when they had performed this experiment. Anybody who would be on the ship in the future while they were on the water when they wanted the ship to go invisible were asked to be on the ship during the experiment. Now, this is all allegedly classified military information, but again, allegedly, there were people who were kind of sitting around waiting for the ship to reappear, and when it did, they were waiting for the crew members who were on the ship to get off, but when they didn't really come off by themselves, that is when they started to send people onto the ship just to make sure that everything was okay. Now, it is said that all of the crew members who were within the ship were all alive, but when they were found, they had a lot of traumatic injuries to them. Many of the people were obviously mentally traumatized from this event, but many of the members were covered in burns covering their entire bodies, whereas others suffered something a little bit more disturbing. Many of the members who had been on the ship at this time were found completely embedded in the walls of the ship. They were alive, but they couldn't move at all because their bodies were stuck in the metal of the ship. Can you imagine being alive and being stuck in a metal inside of a boat? Like, I cannot wrap my head around that. They must have been in such severe pain and just be stuck there. Like, my whole thought process on this was the metal melted and that's why they had gotten stuck, or was there something else at play here? Because imagine being stuck but being alive in hot metal, like, that is such a horrible thought. Again, many people believe that this case is nothing more than an urban legend, and it does sound out of this world, but so do a lot of the military experiments. MK Ultra also is something that sounds completely made up, but when you start diving into it, that isn't even a theory, that is 100% fact. So that is just kind of something else to kind of compare this to. However, I do have to say, not saying that I don't believe this happened or anything like that, but I do have to say that for something this highly classified and something that happened so long ago that so many people are highly interested in, it does just seem that this case is lacking a little bit of information. But that is not to say that it couldn't have happened or that I don't believe that it did happen. It just does seem like there are a lot of holes in this case that I would love to know more information about. So now we're going to talk a little bit about a man by the name of Carl M. Allen, but he is also known, and probably better known, as Carlos Miguel. Now, he is a little bit of a more confusing character who goes along with this case, but I do feel like he is of very large importance in this case, and so because of that, we have to speak about him. In 1956, this Carlos man sent over 50 letters to an author by the name of Morris K. Jessup. Morris had written a book called Case of the UFOs, and Carlos was basically accusing Jessup of not having the correct knowledge to have written this novel. Carlos had claimed that he knew a lot about this topic, and he also claimed that he had been taught everything that he knew by Albert Einstein himself. He said that he was aware of how to combine gravity with electromagnetism in two fundamental fields. Now, whether or not he actually knew how to do this is unknown, but it also isn't known if Albert Einstein knew how to do this. He could have very well known how to do this. I mean, Albert Einstein was a very intelligent man, but it was not public knowledge if he knew how to do what Carlos was claiming he had been taught or not. In one of these several letters that Carlos had sent to Jessup, he was talking about how he had first eyewitnessed a ship vanishing right in front of his eyes in 1943. He was talking about the Eldridge, and he talked about this in great detail, saying that the US Navy was using this intelligence that Albert Einstein had given them to make the ship disappear. And Jessup thought that this was very interesting, and he did try and look into this a little bit more, but of course at this time Carlos was the only person claiming to have witnessed this, and there wasn't really any other information that Jessup could have gone after in this case, so he pretty much just started to assume that either Carlos was completely insane or he was messing with him. And then in 1957, Jessup was contacted by some naval officers. They had been sent from the Naval Research Center, and these officers came to Jessup claiming that they had received a very strange package that they thought that he knew where it had come from. In this package were a bunch of handwritten letters, and it was also accompanied by the book that Jessup had written. All of these letters were written, and they were written very well with extensive knowledge about things like making things disappear and all of this scientific knowledge that was really important. Now, All of the knowledge that was written in these letters, again, was accurate. However, whoever was writing these letters talked extensively about extraterrestrial technology breakthroughs. The strange things about these letters that the Navy officers could easily identify is that they were all handwritten by the same person. However, it looked as if this person was trying to disguise their handwriting. And quickly after Jessup had looked at these letters, that is when he realized that the person who had written these letters was Carlos. Now, does this prove whether or not the Philadelphia experiment happened or not? No, it doesn't, but it definitely goes along with the case. At this time, most people who had been informed about the experiment and what Carlos was claiming just believed that these were the claims of a very mentally unstable man. However, they did create a movie about Carlos's claims, which is called The Philadelphia Experiment, and that movie was released in 1984. After this movie was released, an elderly man by the name of Al Bielek came forward and he said that he remembered that he had been first-handedly involved in the Philadelphia experiment. He said that he had been on the ship at the time, he had been there, he had seen it all, but his brain had been erased and he was meant to forget about this entire incident. However, the movie brought back all of his memories of what he had witnessed. The crazy thing is that during this entire time, Carlos was still writing letters over and over again and sending them to anybody who would listen about the claims that he had witnessed this experiment happening in Philadelphia. And after Bielek came forward, many people just chalked this up to both of the men being mentally unstable and they were kind of feeding off one another. But I don't really know if after all of this came out, that is exactly what I believe. In 1994, an astrophysicist and ufologist wrote an article that was titled Anatomy of Hoax, the Philadelphia Experiment 50 Years Later. And in this article, he asked that if anybody had any more information on this topic to please contact him. That is when he was contacted by a man by the name of Edward. Edward had been part of the Navy between the years of 1942 and 1945. Edward shared some interesting information saying that he was docked in Philadelphia in the summer of 1943. That would be exactly where the Eldridge was docked, and he did confirm that the Eldridge was in fact there. He was a very intelligent man and he was an electrician on his ship. And because he was an electrician, he had extensive knowledge about top secret devices that the Navy was working on at that time. After contacting this guy who wrote this article, Edward tried to share to the best of his knowledge what he believed happened to the Eldridge during that time while it was docked in Philadelphia. Now, like I've mentioned in previous videos, I am not a scientist and I really am not good at explaining this kind of stuff and wrapping my head around it. However, I'm going to try and explain what he said to the best of my knowledge so that you guys can kind of understand how he explained it away as well. He said that there were these two devices that were made and one of them was placed on his ship and the other one was placed on the Eldridge. He said that these devices were not actually made to make the ships go invisible, but rather to kind of scramble the ship's magnetic signature. The ships had both been wrapped in high voltage cables and wires, making the ship undetectable by boat magnetic tripods. He said that although the claims of the crew and whatnot were going around at that time quite frequently, a lot of people were talking about this ship that had vanished. He thought that there was nothing more than kind of drunk sailor talk. He thought that this was kind of just a story that everybody knew was an urban legend and that nobody really believed it. However, many people obviously did. And that is really all the information that there is about the Philadelphia experiment. I really tried to extensively research this case because I do just think that it is so interesting and such a topic that you could dive into for hours, but there honestly just isn't that much information. Many people, even to this day, believe that this was some kind of just mass cover-up and that they used Edward to kind of come forward and explain it away just to kind of shut everybody up about the topic. But many people also do believe that this was nothing more than an urban legend. So I definitely want to know what you guys think about this case down below. I personally am kind of on the fence. I don't know if I believe that it actually happened or if I believe that this was some kind of cover-up. However, I do believe that if we did somehow have this technology, it would be in the government's best interest, obviously, to keep it hush-hush, and they wouldn't really want it getting out to the public. So I totally can understand if that was the case and this actually did happen, because I don't understand how so many people seem to have known about it, but only this one guy knew that it was not making the ship actually vanish. But guys, that brings us to the end of this video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!